بشنو از نی چون حکایت می کند، از جدایی شکایت می کند. که از نیستن چون مرا ببریده اند، از نفیرم مرد و زن نلیده اند. Listen to the song of the reed in its weeping, for it tells the story of our separation. For since the day the reed was torn from its riverbank, in its sorrow is heard the cry of every man, of every woman. And so it was that terrible plagues descended on the people of Al-Misr, on the people of Egypt, and how much suffering it caused the people who lived there. And it was during this time that an Egyptian came to the door of his neighbor who was of the people of the prophet Musa, of the prophet Moses. And when his neighbor opened his door to him, this is what the Egyptian said: "Neighbor, tonight I want you to forget that the world has declared us enemies. Tonight I want you to forget that the world has forbidden that I and you should speak as neighbors. Tonight, rather, I want you to remember the many years before, where we were the balm of each other's loneliness, where our families freely came into each other's home, where we each called the other with an open heart, Dostum, my friend. I want you to remember these many years tonight as I come to you and ask for you a favor. I ask for a cup of water. For since the terrible plagues came to my people, not one drop of fresh water has moistened my lips." And to this the neighbor replied, "Dostum, my friend, I've heard of all the terrible plagues that have descended on your people. And every night I was worried that you would have too much pride to come to my door as you have come tonight to ask for my help. Please come in, and I will bring you fresh water from my own well." And so the Egyptian was led inside, motioned to sit on a bench as his neighbor went to draw water from his own well. And the neighbor returned with a clay cup filled with fresh water, which he offered his friend, the Egyptian. And the Egyptian was about to put that clay cup to his lips, but when he looked in that cup, he saw there was blood inside. And he cried out, Is this how you return my honest heart, that I come here, you serve me water? Instead of water, you serve me blood? What does this mean?" Well, the neighbor was very troubled. So he took the clay cup to his own hands, and when he looked in that cup, he saw there was water. "Look," he said to the Egyptian, "look, I brought you water." But when he tilted the cup towards the Egyptian, it became blood. But when he tilted the cup back, it became water again. And when the Egyptian saw this, he cried out, After all that I have suffered, must I suffer this as well? What is it within me that chases the water away and only leaves blood behind? What is it in me that chases away the water and only leaves blood behind?" And then his neighbor turned to him, motioning him to calm himself. "Dostum, my friend," he said, "do not trouble yourself. Tonight I will offer prayers on your behalf. prayers inscribed deep within my own heart. Come tomorrow, we will try again. And so the Egyptian left his neighbor that evening. The next day came, and it was a day like the many others that were before it. He walked down the streets of his city, filled with cries of anger and despair. But somehow it was different. For behind the cries of anger and despair that day, he saw his city as it once was and could be, if only. He walked down those empty streets that no one had the courage to walk down. And yet today it was different. For behind those empty walls and those broken walls and those empty streets he saw every day, he saw behind it himself as he once was, and he could be, if only. And he walked down, winding those empty streets. And it took a while for him to notice that he was being followed. He turned around to see what were the footsteps behind him. And he saw what was following him was his own freedom. He would wind down one street and turn the other, but when he looked back, there was his freedom, always following him behind, like a mother following its child as it takes its first steps. And so the Egyptian continued to wander through his empty, lonely city, down those empty streets behind which everyone else hid their despair and anger. But every time he turned around, there it was, his freedom forever following him. And it followed him all the rest of that day. And when night fell, when he looked around, he saw that his freedom was touched by the moonlight. It was like a bright light that was following him wherever he went. And it followed him all the way back to the door of his neighbor. And when his neighbor opened the door, he smiled at him and embraced him and motioned him to sit on that bench that he sat on the day before. And very hurriedly he went to his well to draw another cup of water for his guest. And then the Egyptian reached for that clay cup, filled with anticipation, filled with fear. And he brought the cup towards him. At first he was too afraid to look into it, but then with one glance, he looked into that cup. And he saw inside there was water, fresh, clear water. But then at that moment, something he didn't expect to happen had happened. For at that moment, he was no longer thirsty. And so he passed the cup back to his neighbor, saying this, "Rustam, my friend, I thank you for this cup of water. This cup of water you offer me with an open heart. But tonight I realize that I have all the waters of the Nile flowing within me. Waters as clear as an open heart. Water as fresh and as refreshing as the best of intentions. Water as sweet to satisfy any thirst. For tonight, now that I have found my freedom, I know I will never be thirsty ever again." Beshno az ne chon hekayat mikonad. Az jodaya shikayat mikonad. Listen to the song of the reed in its weeping, for it tells the story of our separation.